Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be talking about the things that they don't tell you about postpartum that literally should come in a handbook when you leave the hospital, but they don't give that to you. So these are just the things that I experienced. I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just here to say, hey, if these things happen to you, you're not alone, and it could be a reference point, because I wish I had some of this when I was going through. Of all the bloggers and stuff that I watched or read and everything, it was like nobody really talked about this stuff. So I'm gonna do it.
Stop chasing all the city lights. Breathe me in, go on and take your bite. Count.
So you just had your baby, you are in bliss, you are so in love, and you are getting to know this new little creature, and there are so many things happening to your body that you never expected to happen, nor did anybody tell you that would happen. The first one being the combo: breastfeeding and contractions. You can hear them out there. So when you are done giving birth, you are still having contractions because your uterus has to contract back down to size in order to shrink. And it does this in a pretty quick, fast manner. And when you breastfeed, you are releasing hormones. The baby is helping you release hormones that encourages those contractions to happen, which means postpartum, when your epidural wears off, you are going to have contractions that can get as intense as the contractions pre-labor. Mine weren't as intense as labor, but a few of them got pretty intense, and I was just like, oh my gosh. Whoa. They only last for the same, like the minute, but the entire time you're breastfeeding, that first couple of days to a week to 2 weeks afterwards, when you're breastfeeding, you will contract. You can contract. Not everybody does, but it's pretty common to do it. And while yes, that does help speed up the process to put your uterus back into its regular size, it is sometimes a shock to people, to women, to be like, I thought I was done. Why is this happening? What's going on? And it's like, guess what? This is just your body and baby's natural way to put your uterus back into orbit. And it's a little painful, but it's totally worth it. Totally normal. And it can even happen if you're pumping right after that, which brings me to another point about breastfeeding. Is your little one, when they're a newborn, will eat every hour and a half to 2 hours, usually about 2 hours. So your milk isn't going to come in right away. Your colostrum is going to come in first, and that little bit is just going to be enough because their stomach is like literally like that big. It's like super teeny. And day by day it grows, and they can take a little more, but it's kind of like a nature's gradual way of building your supply of colostrum to that transitional milk and then to real milk. And highly suggest when you're in the hospital, if they allow you to pump on their machines, to pump on their machines. I was breastfeeding for half an hour to 45 minutes each breast because he was a really good latcher. He really liked to do both. He was a really good eater, and he's still a good eater. But then after that, I would literally pump for 15 minutes just to make sure I was stimulating my breasts and draining. And since he was a jaundiced baby, when he was in the NICU, I had the pump with me. So from that day after I had him, that very next morning, like I had him 6:29 on Monday night, that very next day I started pumping with the lactation consultants. And every 2 hours I was pumping, and then he would come in, and we would either, depending on how close I had just pumped, we would either give him a bottle, or I would kind of hold off to pump and I would breastfeed him. So it kind of enacted that to every 2 hours of stimulating the breast. You will find when you go home, it is a full-time job. And since my son was already used to bottles and formula, it was kind of nice because I started to pump to bottle and did half breast, half bottle, and then eventually went more formula at night, which I will get into in another video. So it's a lot. So you're breastfeeding every 2 hours. After you breastfeed, you should always pump to help get your supply up. And it's a lot. You're going to be exhausted to a point where I cannot describe to you the level of exhausted you are going to be. It's going to be so worth it. And mamas, you are going to find second and third wins that daddy doesn't have. Don't hate him for it. It's literally just how your body is created to actually, I believe, handle the intense breastfeeding need for your baby. That we get those extra surges of energy when you just don't think you can go on anymore. And you can do it, you will do it, you will make it through. I promise you, after 2.5 months, especially after 3 months, it gets so much easier. Trust me. You just have to get through those first couple of months, and they are sleepless and they are anxiety inducing, but yes, you will be exhausted. And do not be afraid to ask for help. I didn't ask for help soon enough, and I will explain that in another video, but you need a support system around you. I know it's hard with COVID being around now, but you need to have help because you lose your supply if you're stressed, if you're exhausted, and if you're not eating enough. And it brings up another point. You need to eat. Doesn't matter. I'm gonna say it doesn't matter what you eat, so long as you're getting calories and you're drinking like enough water. Like, you need to drink a lot of water when you're breastfeeding, because your baby can get dehydrated through your breast milk if there's not enough water content in your breast milk. So you have to hydrate. You have to like almost overhydrate. Like, you got to look up the numbers for your body, how much you should be drinking. I think mine was like 100 milliliters a day. So I just kept my hospital bottle next to me, and I knew I had to drink like 5 of those a day to be sufficiently quenched, you know, and to produce well. And you have to eat carbs. I lost 12 pounds in the first week, 10 pounds in the second week, 5 pounds in the third week. I went from 117 to 154, and I lost 27 pounds within the first 3 weeks of giving birth, because I was breastfeeding, yes, but I wasn't getting enough food. So after those first 2 weeks, I started eating a lot of carbs, a lot of protein, as healthy as I could, but sometimes you just got to get that food in you. I ate a lot of oatmeal and stuff like that to help increase my supply, and Gatorade and oatmeal really helped increase my supply. Don't know why it helped, but it did. It helped give me electrolytes and the carbs that I needed. And yeah, so eat. Don't worry about losing the weight right away, because if you start hurting your own body, your baby's gonna suffer. So you need to eat and you need to drink. Something that they also didn't tell me about, which I am still dealing with today, is the tailbone issue. So you can bruise, fracture, dislocate, or break your tailbone during delivery. And I am pretty sure I've done one of those things. I am going to go to the doctors and get an x-ray just to see, for my own personal interest, to see what I need to do, because it is past 12 weeks and it still hurts if I sit on certain surfaces. So it could be a bad bruise, it could be a fracture. There's not really much you can do for it other than just have exercises to kind of strengthen the muscles around the base of your tailbone, your coccyx, to help strengthen it. But that is something that you can have. Another thing that you can have that I didn't have is back pain, lower back pain or upper back pain from your epidural, or the epidural headache. I did not get either one of those, thank God, but those are 2 things that can happen. My sister had an epidural headache for a week after her epidural, and she had a lot of lower back pain from her epidural. So those are 2 things that you can have. Tear spot. Your tear spot is going to be sore, and when it starts to heal, it's going to get stingy and it's going to get itchy. Don't itch it. Just leave it alone. Use witch hazel. And yeah, it's not fun, but it heals, and you will get over it, I promise. Bleeding. You will bleed a lot. Now, with me, my 12 weeks, I have had my first period. And let me tell you, I must be a weird one, because my postpartum bleeding compared to my first period back bleeding are nothing alike. I am bleeding so heavily on my period versus when I was recovering, it was like a normal period for me before I got pregnant. It was, and even less than. I was like, wow, am I bleeding enough? Like when you're thinking like, am I bleeding enough? But my body was doing a really good internally of healing. Now, one thing that I encountered at week 6 and 7, between week 6 and 7, was I stopped bleeding at week 5 and into week 6. Into end of week 6 and 7, I started bleeding again pretty heavily for about 9 days. And I was concerned. I was like, oh my gosh, am I hemorrhaging? And again, compared to my sister who bled a lot all the way through 12 weeks, had the crazy looking clots, all that stuff. She's like, you're not hemorrhaging, trust me. This is even close to what I was doing when I was, you know, she was bleeding pretty substantially all the way through to 12 weeks. I stopped and started again. So I did go into the doctor and they told me that it could be something called the placental scab, which I didn't know about. So apparently you have this paper plate sized wound on the inside of your uterus where your placenta was attached. And the healing process is kind of like a scabbing, and then it can usually around week 6 or 7 to 8 fall off. So it kind of sloughs off. So it's not a period, but it's kind of like a period, but it's like your placental scab falling off. And then after that 9 days, there was no more bleeding. Fast forward to week 12, postpartum, I had my first period, which is very similar to the placental scab falling off. So I don't know if it was actually a period or placental scab, but if that happens to you, if you're not soaking through a pad like every half an hour to an hour or having like golf ball sized clots, you're usually pretty okay. But again, I'm not a medical professional, so definitely, if I called my doctor so much and I called my sister and my mom and I sent pictures, and it was, my husband was like, what are you doing? But it's better to be safe than sorry. Always ask. Don't ever be afraid not to ask. So definitely do that. Hives. This goes along with your hormone dip. So there is something called baby blues, which I hate that name because depending on how intense you get them, they're not baby blues. They can definitely be postpartum anxiety, depression, which is what I had. But I can say there is definitely a dip in your hormones postpartum, like within a few days, you could feel the shift happen. And usually when you go home from the hospital, they have you on ibuprofen or some kind of like a painkiller, pretty heavy. I had naproxen, but I ended up not taking that, which is like an ibuprofen type, Motrin type, heavy Motrin. I had just regular high dosed ibuprofen. And after a week of being on ibuprofen, because it wasn't necessarily my vagina or my tear spot or my cervix that, you know, my stomach that hurt. It was my damn tailbone that hurt. So when I stopped taking it, I got hives. Like hives, like legit hives, like allergic reaction looking hives. And I was like, what is this? And apparently it's very common for women postpartum to either get them when they stop taking their like ibuprofen, Motrin pain pills, or if they're not taking pain medication, it's just a hormonal imbalance thing that happens. And my sister luckily was the person who said, oh, by the way, when you stop taking your ibuprofen, you might get hives. And I was like, what? So when I stopped taking my ibuprofen, I was a little nervous. I was like, where am I going to get these hives? And I got them on my legs. So I got them on my knees and a little bit on my elbows. But it was only a day and a half of hives, thank God. I wasn't covered in them. There is something that is definitely hormonal. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but they look like like a rash around your stomach, around your breast area, that is common. And that's the more hormonal caused one. Mine was probably a mixture of both getting enough high dose of ibuprofen, because ibuprofen can cause hives, and hormone imbalance. Who knows? But that is just something to watch out for. Sore nipples. If you're breastfeeding, this again, I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to get a good nipple cream, and the lanolin soothies. They're like a gel soothie that are like cooling. Definitely get those, because, and even if you had to break down and get a nipple shield like I did for a couple of times, do it, because it can be pretty intense and pretty painful. And I will make an entire video on postpartum and breastfeeding and how emotionally investing it is and how emotionally draining it is. But protect your nips as best as you can, because they're gonna get cracked and they're gonna get sore. It's just a part of the course. And if once you get over that, when you get to that cracked ouch stage, you just got to push past it. And then once you get past it, they're like cultured to they like have calluses on them. So there you go. So those are for you, that they didn't tell me, that I had to figure out by myself. And this is for your baby. Like babies, newborns, they sound like they're dying 24/7. They make all kinds of noises, and I was blessed with an extremely vocal, extremely loud child. Like my son just loves to talk. He's a talker already. He's 13 weeks on Monday, and he is like, he's already mimicking like vocal tonations, and he just loves to have conversations, and he's always been a loud baby. And when you're not used to that, it's pretty intense. They're gonna sound like they're choking, that they're struggling, that they are dying. New babies make an array of extremely intense sounds. So just be ready for that. Babies also produce a lot of bodily fluid from pee, poop. If you're breastfeeding, they're gonna basically poop after every meal, and it's gonna be watery. Load up your baby's butt with Vaseline and cornstarch, a thick layer of both. When you're breastfeeding, they are at a higher risk, I found out, to get butt rashes, and we got a pretty nasty butt rash right off the bat after being home, and we had to be on some prescription medication for that. Load up your baby's butt with Vaseline, cornstarch, or Balmex and cornstarch. Whatever you do, put a layer of cornstarch on it, because that cornstarch will soak up that moisture and help wick away the moisture from your baby's butt, and your baby will thank you, and your baby's butt will thank you. And trust me, there is nothing worse than watching your baby go to the bathroom and know that they're in pain because of a butt rash. It's like so horrible. And even if you're not breastfeeding, even if you're bottle feeding with formula, usually they only poop like once a day, maybe every couple of days. Do the same thing just to prevent the butt rashes, because those things are hell. And do yourself a favor. Babies sleep a lot. They will sleep so much. You'll be like, should I be entertaining you? Should you be up and doing something? No, babies sleep so much for that first month and two. It's like intense how much they sleep. So just, yeah, so long as they're getting up, they're eating well, they're, you know, having the right amount of diapers wet that you need to change, they're fine. Just let them sleep. Don't wake a sleeping baby. Trust me. Throw it up versus spit up. Now, this is something that I had a hard time with, that really triggered my postpartum anxiety, that I'll get to another video. We, unbeknownst to us, because we're both not around kids a lot, we let our son suck down a 50 milliliter bottle of formula, because we brought him home that first day we did, and he's a little guzzler, and we let him. He was overfed and he threw up, but he also threw up through his nose. Now, usually when babies throw up, if through their nose, if they're refluxy or they've been overfed, so that is an intense situation. Basically, what you just got to do is lean him a little bit forward. Try not to panic. I always usually panic a little bit. It's hard to see your baby like struggling, because their nose is the only way they know how to breathe. They do not breathe through their mouth until right around 6 months. And even then, a lot of the times they choose to breathe through their nose still. it's hard. You got to keep that airway clear. So let them do their thing, let them finish, and then suction them out as best you can. And, you know, they usually are really unbothered by it. It's really interesting. Like my son used to, you know, when he would go out his nose a couple of times, he just didn't seem bothered by it. Now he has done just twice where it actually got, like there were chunks of food that kind of got stuck in his nose that you kind of see him get panicked because he couldn't breathe. So you got to suction those out. And when babies cry, babies can cry. And when babies do cry, that's the way they breathe through their mouth. That's the only way when they're newborns and early infants that they can breathe through their mouth, is when they cry. So that's a good thing. And so long as your baby's making a noise, they're getting air in. Now spit up, that's usually burping, you know, that falls out of their mouth. One thing that we learned with our son that we had to do with him, he would kind of get, if we laid him down too soon after we fed him, he would verp. That's how I describe it. He would verp up through his nose. So he wouldn't get like, he wouldn't throw up, but he would like burp wet up his nose, and it would irritate him, and it would get like caught in his nose, and he would get like, you know, sound like he would have some problems. We'd have to suction him. So if your baby is doing that, they could have reflux. I would highly suggest after you finish feeding your baby, we started off burping my son every ounce. Now we're on every 2 ounces we burp him because he's taking about 5 ounces now. So start off every ounce, sometimes half ounce if they're really bad. They're not gonna like it, but sometimes it's what you have to do to make sure that that food stays down and that they're the gas out. We switched from the Advent just like breast 1s to 0s. So it was a super slow flow nipple. And now we're on Doc Brown's anti-colic, anti-reflux gas bottles, which have been a game changer. I highly suggest them. You can also get those in a 0 or a 1. And he's on a 1 now that he's 3 months. So he's been on that since he was about 2.5 months. And that has really been a game changer. But make sure you burp them really, really well. Make sure that they are set up for at least 20 minutes to a half an hour. Which sucks when you're breastfeeding because you're already breastfeeding for half an hour, and then you're sitting up with them for half an hour, and you gotta, you know, post pump if you're still working on that. So it's a lot. But if you are concerned about like new mom concerns, like, oh my God, is he gonna asphyxiate or choke in his sleep on his throw up? Babies have a natural mechanism where they turn their head if they're spit up. As long as they're on their back, they're good. They should be good. So that was a fear that I had to get over, and I totally understand it if you have it, but just let you know that's something that really gave me peace of mind was my husband and I would sit up with him post feeding 20 minutes to half an hour, and now we do it 15 to 20 minutes since he's older and his body is a little bit more mature and he's able to take it. So those are some things that I was not told postpartum about your body, about your baby. So I hope these have helped. I hope these have helped ease some of your anxieties or fears or worries. And I will come at you with another video about postpartum depression and anxiety. It isn't pretty, but it does need to be talked about. One love, guys.